Welcome to the deep dive. So the 2025 federal government shutdown kicked off October 1st. Lots of headlines, obviously, but today we're doing something specific. We want to cut through that noise and really understand what happens at NASA when, well, the funding stops.
Exactly. That's the mission. NASA isn't just any agency. Even a temporary pause in appropriations lapse, it can cause real lasting damage. Think about those multi-year projects. So we need to look at exactly which missions are continuing, like ISS or Artemis, what it costs, and crucially, how the rules for these accepted activities are maybe different this time around.
And it starts with the legal side, right? These accepted activities, the ones that keep going, they have to be about protecting life and property, or, specifically allowed by law.
That's the core of it. And when you've got astronauts orbiting Earth and billions in hardware up there, drawing that line is, well, it's critical.
It definitely is. And that line has an immediate human cost. Let's look at the numbers from NASA's own plan, the one from September 29th. They have 18,218 civil servants. Out of those, 15,094 were immediately furloughed. That's what? About 83%.
83%. It's a massive number, yeah. Though, interestingly, not quite as high as some past shutdowns, but still, imagine that. They had about half a day, maybe 4 hours, to secure everything, send people home, power down non-essentials.
So who's left? About 3,124 people. Those are the accepted employees.
Correct. And they're keeping three main things running, according to the plan. 1, International Space Station operations. 2, ongoing satellite operations. And 3, this is a significant one, Artemis programs, development, and operations.
Okay, ISS makes sense. You can't just turn off the lights with people up there.
Absolutely not. That's the clearest example of protecting life and property under the Anti-Deficiency Act. You need 24/7 command control, monitoring for debris. Micrometeoroids, MMOD, plus supporting crew rotations, cargo deliveries. It's legally necessary, operationally essential.
Right. Now, before we dig into Artemis, let's touch on pay, because this is tough. The furloughed folks, the 83%, they will get back pay eventually. That's guaranteed by law now, the Government Employee Fair Treatment Act from 2019.
But the accepted employees, the ones actually working right now on ISS, on Artemis?
They're working without pay for now. They only get paid once the shutdown ends and funds are appropriated.
And that's a huge burden. Think about it. You're deemed essential. You're maintaining incredibly valuable assets, maybe even national security-related ones, and you're doing it while facing personal financial uncertainty. It's a tough situation to put your most critical staff in. Really unsustainable long-term.
Definitely. Okay, so that brings us to the big change this time, Artemis. The plan explicitly adds Artemis programs development and operations exploration as a major exception. You said that wasn't in the August 2023 version of the plan.
It was not. And this is where things get interesting legally and politically. If the standard is protecting existing life and property, how does continuing development and manufacturing for a mission years away, like Artemis II planned for 2026, fit?
Yeah. Seems like a stretch of the Anti-Deficiency Act, doesn't it?
It really signals an administrative reinterpretation, likely driven by political priorities. The justification seems to be that stopping work now would jeopardize the hardware, the supply chain, and ultimately the safety of the future crews and missions. So work is continuing on Artemis II, the crewed flyby, Artemis III, the landing, and even processing for Artemis IV and beyond. Development, manufacturing, testing, it's all moving forward under this exception.
And there's more reinforcing this focus on Artemis, right? Something about carryover funds.
Yes, and this is maybe the most concerning detail from a policy perspective. The plan explicitly states that any remaining carryover funds, money already appropriated from the last fiscal year, can only be used for presidential priorities.
Only presidential priorities, with money that was already assigned.
Exactly. That specific restriction wasn't in the 2023 plan. It seems to direct existing funds, potentially pulling them away from other areas towards the administration's main focus, which is clearly human exploration via Artemis right now. It feels like a policy shift being enacted administratively, using the shutdown as the mechanism.
So could this mean freezing out established science programs, even if they had funding obligated?
That's the implication. The directive is to forbear from incurring obligations on research activities that are not policy aligned with these priorities. So even if a science project had FY24 money legally obligated, the agency might be prevented from spending it now if it doesn't fit under that presidential priority umbrella, which currently seems narrowly defined around exploration.
Wow. Okay, so if you're not ISS, satellite ops, or Artemis, What stops? What grounds to a halt immediately?
Pretty much everything else public-facing and much of the internal research engine. Educational outreach stops. Public tours, visitor centers controlled directly by NASA closed. Even NASA TV and the main website go dark or are severely limited.
And internally, the
Well,
science.
most basic research conducted by NASA civil servants halts. We're also seeing confirmations from science agencies, including NASA and NSF, that during the shutdown, they won't issue new grant solicitations. They won't review proposals. They won't award new grants. Think about that research pipeline. It just gets clogged. Delays stack up.
But we mentioned some places stay open, like JPL, the Jet Propulsion Lab, and the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex.
Right, because they're different. They're managed by non-government entities. Caltech runs JPL, Delaware North runs the KSC Visitor Complex. They operate using funds from existing contracts that were already paid out. However, their operations are still constrained.
How so?
Contractors can only keep working if their tasks require absolutely zero input or oversight from a furloughed NASA employee. Need a NASA safety check. Need a NASA manager to approve a milestone payment. Need to consult with a NASA scientist on the project. Work stops. Performance has to be suspended.
And JPL specifically is facing other issues too.
Yes, adding to the instability, the sources mentioned JPL is moving ahead with a planned Phase 2 reorganization and potential layoffs this month, October. They're apparently looking at cutting somewhere between 4,000 and 5,500 positions from their workforce. That's separate from the shutdown, but obviously compounds the uncertainty for contractors.
That contractor situation sounds precarious, and then there's this even bigger threat looming: permanent cuts. RIFs.
Yes, reduction in force plans. This is perhaps the most alarming long-term development. The administration reportedly directed agencies, NASA included, to prepare these RIF plans. It suggests they might try to implement budget cuts, like the proposed 25% cut for NASA in the FY26 budget request, through administrative action during the shutdown without waiting for Congress to actually pass a budget.
So it's not just a pause, it's potentially using the shutdown to force through permanent restructuring.
That seems to be the concern, yes. It bypasses the normal appropriations process. And it's already facing legal challenges. 2 public sector unions have filed lawsuits against OMB and OPM, basically arguing that implementing mass layoffs is illegal during a shutdown because the very HR staff needed to process the RFs would themselves be furloughed under the Anti-Deficiency Act. It's a legal mess.
Let's step back for a second. How does this compare to past shutdowns, like the big one in 2013 that lasted 16 days?
Good comparison. In 2013, the furlough percentage was actually higher. 97% of NASA staff were sent home. This time it's 83%. The difference, primarily that inclusion of Artemis development as an accepted activity now. That keeps a whole segment of the workforce on the job, reflecting that clear priority shift.
And 2013 showed just how disruptive even short pauses can be for science, right? I remember the MAVEN mission to Mars.
Exactly. Preparations for MAVEN's launch were stopped for just 3 days during that shutdown. 3 days. But that tiny pause nearly caused them to miss their very narrow launch window. If they had missed it, the neckle chance wouldn't have been for 26 months. A 2-year delay from a 3-day work stoppage.
Just shows the stakes. Hubble kept running in 2013, but no new science tasking right. And all public outreach stopped then, too.
Correct. And the contractor situation was painful back then as well. Morale plummeted. Unlike civil servants who knew they'd get back pay eventually, contractors were often left hanging, sometimes told to be on call but without pay, waiting weeks or months to see if their contracts would cover the downtime. That financial uncertainty for contractors. It's exactly the same threat they face today in 2025.
So pulling it all together.
Yeah.
This 2025 shutdown feels different for NASA. Yes, critical stuff like ISS and now Artemis keeps going, but the real story seems to be less about the temporary furlough.
And more about these other factors. The specific policy language restricting carryover funds only to presidential priorities, and the very real threat of permanent workforce reductions, the RIFs. It suggests the shutdown might be used, or is being seen as an opportunity to fundamentally reshape the agency's direction and maybe narrow its scientific focus administratively.
It's moving beyond just keeping essential operations safe, towards actively steering the agency's future during a funding lapse.
Precisely. It feels like a shift away from a science portfolio driven broadly by peer review and congressional appropriations towards one more tightly controlled by immediate executive branch priorities.
Which leaves us, and you, the listener, with a pretty critical question to think about. If political priorities, not just scientific merit or the original intent of Congress, start dictating how even previously allocated funds are spent during events like this, What does that mean for the future of NASA's science? What happens to potentially groundbreaking research that doesn't align perfectly with the political focus of the moment? Is that science just lost?